Morning traders, how we doing? Thanks for joining me for the show. Looking at Kaspa, KAS on that ticker. Been one of the very nice performing altcoins throughout the spring and summer, but after kind of breaking below this 50-period EMA on this weekly chart, we were kind of questioning the setup whether or not the high was in. But obviously over the last couple of weeks, we've had a very nice crypto rally and Trump pump here happening, and a lot of good things, especially a nice recovery for Kaspa. And so specifically do want to look mostly at the weekly chart here for Kaspa, specifically talk about a few key resistance and support levels here. Obviously for support, we know that we had a very nice closing level of support come in just under 11 cents at 10.795. As we can see, it was multiple tested here both times, and obviously in both 3-week times and then obviously 3 tests as well in this instance. It did maintain and hold as closing support. A little bit of wicking down below, but obviously the bulls were able to buy that dip, defend, and have a very nice bounce after each test in a longer term. So what we were looking at recently is that we actually broke below the 50-period EMA on this weekly, which was kind of unfortunate because we zoom out. Obviously the Kaspa chart is a little bit newer, but because we know that it has been defending these exponential moving averages, pretty much confirming this uptrend this whole way, when we actually did break below this 50-period EMA, that was going to be one of the big signs that the trend was actually changing. But kind of fortunately for Kaspa, just based off of where it was, we did still maintain a higher low, or effectively didn't get any new lower lows set. And especially now reclaiming not only the 50, but also the 12 and 26. And what's actually great about this is that this bullish candle that we had from the 4th of November here did just completely smash this downtrend potential. And especially with the magnitude of this body just completely engulfing the past 4 weeks here of bearish trading in kind of a lot of this 5th week as well. And especially reclaiming, like we said, not only the 50, but also having a very nice close on top of the 12 and 26 as well. And the previous week did have a very nice defense of that level. As we can see, we were maintaining closing support after a little bit of dip buying, and then now showing a lot more of that follow through. But now, just because we have defended a very nice support level and reclaimed the trend on top of the 12 and 26 period EMAs, still have plenty of resistance up overhead here. Specifically, we're going to be looking at a big level of closing resistance coming in at 17.123 cents. Looking left, big period of resistance here after pulling back from the all-time high and trend high. Looking left a little bit farther, big resistance, and then big resistance before ultimately rallying up and setting that all-time high. Now, that is going to be a big level that does get tested. As you can see, the current weekly has already tested that. We are seeing this big upper wick here get kind of rejected from that resistance zone. So that is still very much in effect. Obviously, we do have just over 5 days left on the current candle, so plenty of time. Above that, though, we're looking at a very nice resistance coming in at 19 cents, almost 19 right on the dot, and then going to be looking at big resistance here coming in at the 20-cent level. So plenty of upside resistance, but the good thing about this now is that if we actually do see a lot of volume and this follow through does happen, where we are seeing a complete nice bounce and rejection from these lows, we are going to break through all of these zones of resistance. And then that will be able to, ideally, in theory, especially since this has been more or less a big resistive zone since effectively back in February, we are going to be looking at a very nice flip of this whole level as a very, very big support point when we do look at further upside here, as we do look to see the price of Kaspa pushing higher and higher up. So if we do want to have a little bit of fun and some Moon Boy predictions, we can look at a Fibonacci extension here up to the 168 at current, which would put the price of Kaspa at about 27 cents. Looking farther up above that, though, on an extension would be the 2.618, which would be at 37.929. And so effectively, if we look at price gain for both of those, we'd be looking at very nice upside percentage gains of, let's see, up to the 1.618 at 27.3, about 65% from current prices. Not necessarily that crazy. And then up to the 2.618 coming in at 129, almost 130% upside. So about a 2.3x return. Obviously extending even farther up from there, that would be the 3.618 extension, which would be extremely possible in a nice bullish upside market. 195% gain, almost a 3x return. Up from that at the 4.618 236 would be 55.11 cents, 235% from current prices. So plenty of nice upside potential, and these targets should easily be achievable here for Kaspa as we do look to get a lot more bullish and a lot more euphoric with a lot more speculation and hype coming in, not only for Kaspa, but for the rest of the crypto space as well. Now, I do want to look at some technical indicators here for this weekly chart, specifically starting with the RSI Relative Strength Index. And we know that we have seen decreasing highs here as we do have the RSI overall weakening, but this is kind of a good sign because as we have still maintained an overall trend without really seeing a major pullback, we actually have allowed this RSI to kind of cool down where we have seen the lowest levels for this RSI, and on the weekly looking at 37.23. So now what we actually can see is the ability and the opportunity since we put in a low to see this RSI rally up, pull back and set a higher low on the RSI and actually kind of reverse the overall downtrend that we're looking at for this RSI. Obviously, we know that with a RSI decreasing, we know that the trend is slowing down. And historically, we typically think of this as kind of a topping signal and indicator. And that's kind of why initially we saw this break in trend. But because we're starting to be driven and propped up by a lot of the rest of the crypto space, we could actually see this get completely invalidated and start taking off once again without actually seeing a normal downtrend like we typically see out of this kind of RSI setup. So next thing I do want to look at is the stochastic RSI, the relative strength index for the stochastic, and specifically just look at how on the current stochastic RSI here, it was just smashed at the bottom. We're looking at levels of 0.06 for both the levels here, or both the lines. And like we talked about, we were actually dipping below the trend and maintaining kind of a more or less bearish sentiment. So kind of why these RSI did get so low. But if we look back left and at the previous times where we actually saw the stochastic RSI at these levels and have that bullish cross, we saw in each instance, we saw a very nice upside directional move. And that's kind of what we're expecting right now. Obviously, we are a few weeks in and we can see the stochastic RSI getting a little bit more of that follow through. But we would expect that to actually play out where we can see directional upside, at least testing these upper levels of resistance here. And so we will have to be mindful of kind of a top coming in for a lot of these stochastic RSIs if we do get around 88 lines. So the previous times, that's pretty much about as high as it got here before we actually saw pullbacks and retracements where we did ultimately end up rolling back and testing these exponential moving averages for their supportive levels. But since we are now just blowing back above those, we do have plenty of room to run before we do get a big enough gap where we would need to ultimately retrace and actually test these exponential moving averages and confirm them as support. Now, next, do want to look at the MACD moving average convergence and divergence for this chart, because right now, based on this weekly and how we have actually had just barely enough time to generate some of these signals, overall looking at a very good RSI setup where we're looking at a potential bullish cross here coming in. We've already seen max magnitude for the histogram bars here now retracing towards the zero line. So this is one of the better setups that we've actually seen in terms of upside potential and momentum. Because previously before we were sitting very on top of the zero line here, whereas now since we were actually seeing the MACD line get below the zero and almost now have that nice bullish cross, we actually haven't seen a setup and situation like this ever for this weekly chart, where we're actually having the MACD and signal line this low and this close to the zero line for this weekly chart. So overall, this could be a very good sign to actually allow the price to shoot up towards those upside targets that we were talking about. Rolling over into the daily, do want to talk about the VPVR volume profile visible range. Looking at the volume trading pretty much right where we are at, stuck up for resistance right now. So looking left, big heart line for this big period of just more or less sideways trading happening from about the beginning of June until about the end of September. Looking even farther left, big heart line for this resistive point before we finally saw this retracement. So just based off of those, this big resistive zone is going to be highlighted by the fact that we do have all of this previous trade history and volume coming in right at these levels. But the good news about that is that we're looking at a lot of good upside momentum like we talked about. And then once we blow past this, there's actually not much previous trade history resistance coming in before we're in that blue sky breakout and price discovery to the upside, where we're not getting stuck up at a lot of these other previous resistance points. So overall, plenty of good things to be very nicely bullish on for Kaspa. I think the community is great as well. Shout out to all the Kaspa fam. And also, we should see a lot of hype come in, especially with this nice performance and uptrend ever since it has launched. And so with that, that actually is going to go ahead and wrap up the show for today on Kaspa, KAS on that ticker. Hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please hit the thumbs up, like, and subscribe if you have not done so just yet. Don't forget to drop me a follow over on Twitter at coin_trades is the handle over there. Looking forward to chatting. And if you do have any questions, comments, issues, disagreements, all that stuff, drop them a note in the comments sections below. Do love getting back to each and every one of you. That is going to do it for now, though, so stay safe, take care, coin traders, and I'll catch you back in the next video.